So welcome everyone. My name is Les Allen. I'm the moderator for tonight's session with our guest speaker, Chris Johnson. Now, this series of sessions is to help get the word of humanism out to everyone in Australia and to discuss various issues to do with humanism as well. So for those people who are new to humanism and are not really familiar with it, just let me tell you a little about what humanism is. Humanism is a democratic and ethical life stance that affirms that human beings have the right and responsibility to give meaning and shape to their own lives. Humanism stands for the building of a more humane society through an ethics based on human and other natural values in a spirit of reason and free inquiry through human capabilities. Now, that's from the Humanist International Minimum Statement on Humanism. Our speaker tonight is Chris Johnson, and the title of his talk is A Better Life with Chris Johnson. Now, Chris is from Seattle over in the United States. And so what he's going to be talking about tonight, there is no God, now what? So our guest, filmmaker and author Chris Johnson, discusses his work, A Better Life, 100 Atheists Speak Out on Joy and Meaning in a World Without God. Now, before I say a little about Chris, uh, I met Chris somewhere around about 5 years ago. We were just recounting the memory before COVID, when Chris spoke at Melbourne University, and he was speaking about his book then. And when I contacted him about how we could purchase some of his books here in Australia, he said he was coming out to Australia, and I was absolutely delighted that this is another opportunity for him to talk to a new audience who haven't heard about him and his wonderful book. So I'm so pleased that we've got this opportunity while Chris is here to hear about his book and his project. So a little about Chris. Chris Johnson is a New York-based photographer and filmmaker whose work has been showcased in the New York Times, the BBC, and beyond. He was the co-director, co-producer, and editor of Merely Marvelous, the dancing genius of Gwen Verdon, and has worked on projects around the world. Chris is the author of the Coffee Table Photography book, A Better Life, 100 Atheists Speak Out on Joy and Meaning in a World Without God, as well as the director of a documentary film version. He has travelled the world on a screening lecture tour about his work, speaking and screening the film in over 125 cities on 6 continents. He's also the graduate of the Mel Hoppenheim School of Cinema at Concordia University. So pleased to have you here tonight. So it's over to you, Chris.
Thank you. Oh, thank you for the applause. That's great. Thank you, Les, for inviting me to do this, and that I happen to be coming to Australia at the same time, and it's great. And I'm in Melbourne at the moment, and it's lovely, and the coffee's amazing, and the food's amazing. So thrilled to be here again. I've done 2 previous talks in Melbourne. Yeah, and the last one is the one where we met, and so it's just wonderful to be back here again. Let me share my screen. It's like we're living in COVID times again. There we go. Okay. Let's see if I do that. There we go. All right. Now I can't see what slide is coming up next, so it'll be as much of a surprise to me as to you. So hopefully I can remember what slide is after each one. But before I start the actual kind of getting into the talk itself, I just want to give a little bit of background about myself and where I'm coming from, because I think, so many people approach these conversations and these topics kind of from the perspective that they were raised in or grew up in. So I think it's important to talk a little bit about just my own background in that sense. So like Les said, I grew up in Seattle, on the west coast of the United States, and I have one brother. My parents are not particularly religious. My mother's an atheist. My father, a very liberal Christian, and he only started going to church uh, after I went off to university. So really didn't have much of a religious upbringing. Um, my parents divorced when I was about 11 or so. Um, like I said, spent most of my time in Seattle, childhood. Then I moved to university to Concordia University in Montreal on the east coast of Canada. And I started taking some religion courses along with the film courses I was taking. And I found them really interesting. I think because I was curious about what other people believed, kind of in a sense, because I didn't have any of that growing up. Um, and so I actually ended up minoring in religious studies at Concordia. Um, and it was just a fascinating experience, kind of learning about different religions around the world, different belief systems, that kind of a thing. Um, and this is also around the time when the new atheist movement really kind of kicked in. So we're talking 2005, 2006, in that time period when The God Delusion came out, Letter to a Christian Nation, The End of Faith, all of that was kind of around that time as well. And so I read all those books and I thought they were incredible. And it also kind of gave a label to what I was thinking at that time as well. So even though I was studying all this religion stuff, there wasn't any one that stuck out to me, and I thought, oh, that's the right religion. It was always like, oh, all this, none of this makes much sense. And so I was able to put a label on that by reading things like The God Delusion. So anyway, I moved to New York after that. In 2006, I moved to New York, and I was just kind of doing various um, freelance work, odd jobs, things like that. And I wasn't particularly excited with kind of where things were going. Um, I think a lot of people, especially around that 2008 kind of financial crisis as well, didn't help things. Um, and so, yeah, I was at a time where I kind of was struggling to figure out what I was doing. And I went on a road trip with my brother, and that was in 2010, no, 2011. And we went on a road trip, and we stopped here, which is White Sands National Monument in New Mexico. Ooh, somebody wants to come in. There we go. And we stopped at White Sands National Monument in New Mexico, and it was one of the most beautiful places I'd ever been at the time. I'll show you some footage here. Oh no. Hold on. There we go. We don't need the audio for this. I just want to show some of the footage from White Sands. It's just an incredible place. It's the white sand dunes stretching for miles and miles and miles. Sorry, kilometers, kilometers, kilometers. And it's a really incredible place. It's like being on a kind of another planet almost. And on this trip, my brother and I were listening to a lot of podcasts in the car, and a lot of them were about atheism. Just because I found the topic interesting, I was forcing him to listen to all this stuff that I was interested in, and I was taking a lot of pictures. And my brother said, you really should do a photography book. And I thought, oh, like so many photography books out there, so many photographers, like, everything's been done. And then thought, well, what if it was a book about atheism? What if it was, instead of, this is why religion is harmful, or why God doesn't exist, what if it were, pictures of smiling, happy people, right? And I thought for sure, by the way, that someone had done this already. Like, you always have an idea and you think, oh, this would make a great idea. And then you look it up and, oh, someone's already done it. And I could not find anything like this when I started. So I was just really excited to kind of start doing something big, really at that time, the biggest thing I'd ever done. Um, and I started to do a fundraiser. Oh, look, there's me driving the car. Um, started to do a fundraiser for it. I started by going on Kickstarter, and Kickstarter was pretty new at that time, and it was a real sweet spot, actually, I think, for Kickstarter because um, it was legitimate enough or seen as legitimate enough by many people, so people felt comfortable giving, but it wasn't oversaturated at that time. So it wasn't where, GoFundMe, I don't think it started yet. Um, I don't know if Indiegogo was a thing at that time. I don't know if they're still around, actually. I assume they are. But it wasn't an oversaturated market, I think, like it is now. I think luck played a lot into why I was able to do this project, like it does for everything in life, right? So, um, it was the kind of the right time and the right place for something like this. Um, so I got some great kind of feedback at the time. I remember from just you know what when you put yourself out as a non-believer on the internet, you get some great comments. So um, you can say that that's great because you won't be writing books in hell. So that's fun. I also love that their like image there, it says Hillary for Prison 2016. Yeah, it's great. I got some other interesting things. This person emailed me when I was doing the Kickstarter for the book, and he said, "I'm a 6-year-old still in the closet atheist. I have to be due to my very conservative, narrow-minded Western Pennsylvania surroundings. Life makes more sense now. I can live for now and enjoy my life, not suffer now so that I don't burn for eternity. Losing my religion has been such a refreshing change." And as somebody who wasn't raised in a religious environment, it really kind of struck me because uh, to see that people were having an emotional reaction to just the idea at this point, not even the book itself, but just the idea that somebody would do this um, was pretty incredible to get that kind of feedback. Although I should point out, this person finished their email to me by saying, "I'm anxious for your book to be published, though I'll have to hide it under my bed so my wife doesn't find it." So, finally my work had something in common with pornography. So took long enough. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. It was stressful trying to raise money to do the project. Here's a graph of that 2-month long funding process. And it finished on April 8th, which was my birthday. It was my 30th birthday, so it was the best birthday present I could have ever asked for. So raised $103,000 to make the book happen, which at the time was the second highest grossing publishing project Kickstarter had ever done. I think I don't know what it is now. Last time I checked, which was, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago or something, it was like 7th. So it's still up there, but very excited. So I was off traveling around to meet and photograph and interview different atheists, non-religious people, and whether they go by the label of atheists or not. I mean, they didn't believe in God, so some of them preferred labels of humanists, some preferred labels of atheists, some preferred non-religious, things like that. So traveling around, did some cool stuff. There's me in an airplane. That is Edinburgh, Scotland, one of my favorite places. London, Cleveland, at least we're not Detroit. And I met some really cool people, some of whom you might recognize from just kind of the small community that we all are. We all know each other. Dan Barker, co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, really wonderful, wonderful person. Julie Sweeney, former SNL comedian, again, hilarious. If you haven't seen her one-woman show, Letting Go of God, I would really recommend it. It is just a joy to watch. I think it's like 2.5 hours or something, but it's to sit there for 2.5 hours and watch this woman just articulately talk about life and love and loss, and I mean, it's just an incredible piece of theater, and I think it's available for free on YouTube now, so you can check that out. Julie Sweeney's Letting Go of God. Darren Brown, a brilliant kind of magician, illusionist from the UK. If you haven't heard of him, he's fantastic. Cara Santa Maria, who's a science communicator. You might recognize her from various things. She was on the Bill Nye reboot, Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, things like that. She's great. A.C. Grayling, who is a great philosopher. You probably, if this is the humanist group, probably know of A.C. Grayling. That's Nala Mahmood. She was from Sudan, now living in London. We went to an Eritrean coffee place together. Just really wonderful experience I had. Nick Robertson, who's an airline pilot, who saw me in that same plane earlier as well. Alex Honnold, one of my favorite people I met on this project. He's a rock climber, free solo. If anybody saw that film, just a fantastic, wonderful person. Had a really great time just getting to know him. Hemant Mehta runs Friendly Atheist. Brilliant again. Matthew Chapman, Charles Darwin's great-great-grandson. And what I loved about Matthew is that he's also a fellow New Yorker. And I went to his apartment on the other side of the park, and he had this whole table set up of all these items that were important to him. He really fulfilled the brief and said, okay, here's all my stuff that is important to me. You can take my picture in front of all this stuff, and had all this amazing art. And it's very, very representative of him. I love it. So there's wine there, there's a copy of his book, and there's some Darwin stuff, the monkeys and things. It's quite clever. So really fascinating guy. This is Dodge Johansen, who discovered the Australopithecus known as Lucy. There I am holding a replica of Lucy's skull, not the real thing. That's, I believe, I don't know where the original specimen of Lucy is. I might be in Addis Ababa, but yeah, I'm not sure on that one. Don't quote me on that. So it took about 1.5 years of traveling, photographing, interviewing all of these people, and just having really interesting conversations about topics that I think are important, and topics that often we didn't focus on enough a lot. There was so much kind of anti-religion talk, which I think is important. But, so many people are left with a sense of, okay, I don't believe in God now. Well, now what do I do? Right? So we were spending so much time talking about the there's no God part. It was important for us to talk about, well, what happens post that, right? We did a really great launch in New York for the event. A number of people who were in the book came to see it, which is great. And then I spent another 9 months or so working on the film version of it, Better Life and Exploration of Joy and Meaning in a World Without God, which you can get in Australia via the website. Just the book, because the book is so heavy, shipping it is very expensive. So you can't get the book, unfortunately, here in Australia, but I believe you can get the film. So that's something to think about as well. And like Les said, I embarked on a tour to kind of talk about these ideas in person. So we did skip this. We did a talk here in London where I premiered the film for the first time, and just went various places. I initially was just going to do a couple of them. That's in Detroit. There is Syracuse. Again, beautiful Art Deco theater there in Syracuse. And like I said, I was only doing like 6 of these, and then they just kept coming, and I kept doing more and more of them. And like Les said at the beginning, I ended up doing over 125 on 6 continents. Just need to get to Antarctica someday, which is probably the most atheist continent of them all, right? I mean, it's only scientists and penguins, so it's probably full of them. I thought this would be a fun poster to have in here because obviously back in Australia, I did a whole Australia, Singapore, New Zealand thing. Went all around the North Island of New Zealand, which was fantastic, and went into Sydney and Melbourne as well, and up to Singapore, which was a lot of fun. Also South America, this is a poster from the South American premiere in Lima, Peru. And this is from Guatemala. I was on the morning show in Guatemala to talk about the project. And we had a line out the door of people like wanting to come see this in Guatemala, which I thought was really, really cool. And that was in Shanghai, in China. So it really was such an exciting experience for me to do this book, to do this film, to then not only to do those things, but then to travel and meet people and have experiences where we can talk about the themes and ideas and meanings and things like that. It was really such a wonderful thing to be able to do. And I learned a lot about other people. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about kind of life from just doing it. And I could show some clips from the film, which I'll show in just a minute. But just to give you kind of a couple of things that kind of initially come to mind when I think about this project and I think about these ideas. I think there's a great freedom that comes with atheism. I think there's a freedom, but there's also responsibility. And I think, you know, choosing what's important to you, right? Like you have such an incredible opportunity to be able to choose things and to decide what how you want to live your life and how you want to see the world and what things are important to you. But there's also a lot of responsibility with that, you know, responsibility not to be a terrible person. And that comes from you. It doesn't come from a higher power or anything like that. And it comes from each other, right? It comes from us holding each other accountable for things. And you know, that's not always easy. There's tension in that. There's tension in those conversations. But I think there's so much kind of freedom and you know, opportunity that comes with kind of freeing from religion. And I've seen that in so many people that I've spoken with. And again, because I didn't have that experience myself, I didn't have this kind of breaking away of religion that a lot of other people have experienced. So I don't have the personal experience of that, but I did meet so many people who were excited, kind of like what that person wrote to me in their email. But meeting people in person and just having these conversations about what they went through and how they see life now and what's important to them and all of that. Relationships, friends, family, spending time with those who are important to us. And I think we all kind of got a taste of that during COVID, right? Like we're all just, you know, we were stuck at home and trying to stay healthy and trying to keep everybody else healthy. And that was a trying time, I think, for many of us. And just trying to make the most of the time we have because it is limited, because we don't know how long we have, because we don't, you know, you never know when things are going to be not over for you or those you care about. You know, it's just, you know, I think it's really important to think about these things, to dwell on them, to really spend time thinking about the big questions in life. And that's something, I think Julia Sweeney talks about. I think I have a clip of that, and A.C. Grayling talks about too, is really taking the time to think about these things because they are important. When people give up their religious belief or lose their religious belief, however you want to kind of frame that, from what I've seen in other people, and this is kind of why I talked about it being freedom, because there's so much bullshit that goes out the window, right? There's so much stuff that just like, oh, that doesn't matter anymore. I'm not going to focus on these things which just don't matter, whether it's your sexuality or what foods you can eat, things like that. All that goes out the window, and you can focus on things that really do matter. And like I talked about, things like your family, your friends, things you want to do. How do you want to spend your time? And it's not just about doing things to impress a god. It's like, okay, well, what do I want? How can I make the most of my life? How can I make the people around me and the people I care about the happiest? What things will make their lives better? And hopefully, if they're asking themselves those same questions, everybody's life can improve from that. And the other thing I want to think about, and I think is important to think about when talking about these things, is there is such a rich history of free thinkers and a diverse group of people around the world who are with us and who are not with us anymore, who share these values. I mean, just the fact that we're having this conversation now, the fact that we are, people right now on this call from all over the world, literally, and people who've written great texts before talking about these important topics, people who will come after us who will write amazing texts and maybe think about things in a way that we didn't think about, or looking back and looking at what somebody said 400 years ago and how that can kind of think about, or it can change the way you think about something today, is pretty amazing. And so you're not alone, right? People often feel alone when they leave religion. People often feel like they're losing something when they give up God. But I think one thing that's really comforting about that, and it's hard for me to say that from personal perspective again, because I didn't have that, but in speaking to others, I really do think there is kind of community both locally for people, right? Nationally, internationally, and historically. And kind of all those things together, I think really kind of hammers home that people really aren't alone. And people often kind of ask me for advice as well, because I've spoken to all these people, all these famous people, all these people who have great thinkers or intellectuals or things like that. And what advice do you have apart from the things I just mentioned? And I'll show you some clips that I think are kind of key for me and that really kind of changed the way I think about things. And then I'll just kind of give some other points as well that I think are included in that, but also a little bit more as well. So the first clip I want to show you is of my friend Matt Dillahunty. You might recognize him. And he makes a very good analogy here, talking about how we think of meaning in our lives. So let's hear what Matt has to say.
You can claim that in the end you're going to be dead and nothing you did mattered. Well, it won't matter to me anymore because I won't exist. It matters to me while I'm doing it. Saying that there's no purpose in doing any of these things because ultimately, you'll be dead is ultimately the universe is going to suffer heat death and nothing anybody ever did will make any difference. But I have a car that I purchased this year after driving my old car for more than 16 years. That old car is going to end up in a junkyard rotting. Was there no purpose in me buying that car? No, I used it for 16 years. I got lots of value out of it. I'm hoping to get similar value out of this car, which will eventually end up in a junkyard, rusting, useless to anybody. It'll eventually decay, blow up when, the sun takes out the earth. But that doesn't mean that I don't have a nice car right now that actually is beneficial to me and to other people.
Now, I'm very fond of repeating, and I repeated at every possible opportunity, what Solon, the Athenian lawgiver, said to King Croesus. He said to him, you've got to remember that a human life is less than 1,000 months long. If you do the maths, supposing you live until you're 80, what's 12 times 80? It's less than 1,000 months. And a third of them, 300 months, you're asleep. Another third of them, you're waiting in line somewhere, in Gwen or somewhere. So you have about 300 months to live with passion, to live with vividness, to live trying to do something, make something, trying to create some significance in your own life, in the lives of people you care about, and indeed in the world in general, if you can. And that's quite that's quite a challenge in a way, but it's a good challenge. And so it means that one must not waste time. As the cobblers used to say, work while you have light. So while you're here, while you have your 300 months, you must put all your energy into it.
In the shadow of the Acropolis, in Athens, the great philosopher Epicurus was in great pain. He wrote to his friend Idomeneus, I write this to you while experiencing a blessedly happy day, and at the same time the last day of my life. My continual sufferings are so great that nothing could increase them. But the cheerfulness of my mind, which comes from the recollection of all my philosophical contemplation and the memory of our past conversations, counterbalances all these afflictions.
He had cancer. They don't know what, this is ancient Greece, but he was in a lot of pain. He had physical pain at the end of his life. And he would just sort of meditate on the happiest times of his life as a way to mitigate the physical pain. And that was a really profound thing for me. I thought, what if you sat and said, if you were going to die tomorrow and you had this time to think, if you were thinking, what were the 10 greatest moments of my life? Really specifically, not big things, not like I graduated from college, but that afternoon when I was, flirting with that guy, and then at the end of the afternoon, I realized he liked me too, and then that night, his foot brushed against mine, and then, whatever. Or it could be anything, or when I finally finished that project, or that party, or that sense of friends that I hung out with in college, and this one night when we all made pasta, but very specific, and really dwell on those great moments, because really that's all you have. That's all you have are these great memories. And I don't know, there's just something really deep about that. Just dwelling on the happy memories of your life and spending time thinking about it and articulating it.
And that's in the film, by the way. If you see the film version of A Better Life, that's a chunk from that. And I just love what both Asa Grayling and Julia Sweeney talk about there. Julia talking about remembering, or dwelling and thinking about, meditating on what things have made you happy, what things are important to you. Because I think that's a good way to really kind of think about how you want to live your life kind of down the road, right? What things have made me happy in the past, what things are important to me, what things have brought me joy, and so what things will continue to make me happy or make things, make life better for me and those around me moving forward. So I think that's for me at least, been something that's been really key and something I've tried to implement in my own life. And Grayling talking about that you really only have 300 months to do whatever it is you want to do also has very much stuck with me. By the way, he says you spend 300 months asleep and you spend 300 months waiting in line. And he mentions Duane Reade. If you don't know, Duane Reade is it's a pharmacy in New York. So, and we recorded that in New York. So he was making a very New York-centric joke there, which I don't think many people know what Duane Reade is outside of New York. So that's what the Duane Reade reference that he mentions there is. But I think it's really important. I mean, you've got 300 months to do whatever it is you want to do. It's not a lot of time. And that's best case scenario, right? So how do you want to spend your time? Because it is very limited amount of time that we all have together. And that's kind of the key thing for me that I discovered through this whole thing was, reflecting on the past to figure out kind of how one should move forward, and realizing that we just don't have a whole lot of time together. And so making the most out of the time that we do have is really the most important thing we can do. And like I said before, I think when you strip away the things that don't matter, it becomes clearer what things are important to you. At least that's what I've found from a lot of people who've come from religious environments, especially conservative religious environments, to atheism, humanism, a non-religiosity way of thinking about the world. So I think we're pretty good. If people have questions on anything I've talked about, I can stop ranting at this point.
So thank you very much for that, Chris. So
Les.
if I can ask us to put our hands together for Chris for his talk tonight.